Good morning. My name is Tony Blackburn. I'm the chief appraiser and one of the owners of Appraisal. We are an appraisal management company covering California and Nevada. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about accessory dwelling units and how to address them in appraisal reports. There's a lot of confusion out there about how to address accessory dwelling units, what an accessory dwelling unit really is, and how Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and even lenders want them dealt with in the report. So this webinar is just kind of a way to kind of bring all of that together and to hopefully standardize the way that we're handling these things. Dennis Kearns is the president of Appraisal. I'm the CEO. We put this together. If you ever have any questions about any issues in an appraisal, especially as they relate to accessory dwelling units, certainly you can email us or call us, and we're happy to help you work through it. The goals and objectives of this short webinar this morning is how to identify an accessory dwelling unit. The differences between FHA and Fannie Mae requirements, they have some slight differences in how they want them handled and what their actual guidelines are. And then also how to find them in the MLS. Sometimes it's a little tough to find accessory dwelling units in the multiple listing services that we use because there's really no standardization on how to find them or what to call them. So sometimes you have to be a little bit of a detective. HUD says an accessory dwelling unit refers to a habitable living unit added to or created within or detached from a primary one-unit single-family dwelling. Together, these constitute a single interest in real estate, and it's a separate additional living unit, including a kitchen, sleeping, and bathroom facilities. Now, that's a pretty wide definition and differs from Fannie Mae a little bit, just in that HUD recognizes an accessory dwelling unit as being within a single-family dwelling, meaning that there's access between the accessory dwelling unit and the main living area without having to go outside or without having some sort of access. And so as part of the highest and best use analysis, the appraiser must make a determination to classify the property as a single-family dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit or a two-family dwelling. So that's part of your analysis as the appraiser. HUD wants it in the site comments. That's where they want you to talk about the accessory dwelling unit, why a property is an accessory dwelling unit, and why it wouldn't be considered a two-family dwelling or a duplex, what the characteristics are of the accessory dwelling unit, making sure that you note that it has a separate kitchen, separate sleeping, and separate bathroom facilities. Make sure that you, for HUD, put that in the site comments. The fact that an accessory dwelling unit is rented or generates income doesn't automatically result in the determination that the property contains two dwelling units. FHA doesn't take a position that an appraiser should conclude the presence of two electric meters that necessarily constitute a two-unit dwelling structure and not an ADU or a duplex. These are just hints about what the property really should be. You know, if a property has 2 meters, a lot of times it will be a duplex, but not always. That's just one aspect that we look at. We look at, as appraisers, highest and best use. We look at what the zoning is. We look at what is typical for the market. We look at a lot of different things, how the structure relates, the accessory dwelling unit, how it relates to the main living area. Does it have all the requisite separate kitchen, separate sleeping, and separate bathroom areas? So we take all of that together, and as an appraiser, that's where we come to our conclusion. So HUD doesn't have any specific, this equals an accessory dwelling unit and this equals a duplex. They leave it up to the appraiser to determine exactly what the property is going to be. So some of the valuation considerations that HUD has are a little bit different than Fannie Mae. ADUs must be shown on the sketch. ADUs must meet HUD minimum property standards. The 3 S's, make sure that you address that with the ADU. Bracketing applies to ADUs as well. You have to have at least one closed sale with a similar accessory dwelling unit. And HUD notes that an accessory dwelling unit should normally be subordinate in size, location, and appearance to the primary dwelling unit, and may or may not have separate metered utilities or a separate means of ingress or egress. The appraiser must not include the separate living area of the accessory dwelling unit in the calculation of the gross living area in the primary dwelling. So you make sure that they're separate. Okay, now Fannie Mae has a little bit of a different take on it. An accessory dwelling unit is typically an additional living area independent of the primary dwelling unit and includes a fully functioning kitchen and bathroom. Whether a property is a one-unit property with an accessory unit or a two-unit property like a duplex done on the 1025 form will be based on the characteristics of the property, which may include but are not limited to the existence of separate utilities, a unique postal address, and whether or not the unit is rented. Again, that's a little on the vague side, but Fannie Mae, essentially, they're leaving it up to the appraiser to determine what this property is. And we, as appraisers, we take all these things into consideration, the whether it's rented or not, whether it's legally able to be rented. There's some municipalities where one unit has to be owner occupied. Then it would, you'd tend to want to do it as a single family home with an accessory dwelling unit. We take all that into consideration, then we make the determination because we're signing the report. So sometimes we'll have lenders that will want us to do a property as a duplex when it really should be an accessory dwelling unit, and make sure that you, as the appraiser, have covered all your bases on determining what the property really is, and make sure you have good backup for that. The appraiser is required to provide a description of the accessory unit and analyze any effect it has on the value or marketability of the subject. Make sure you state those things specifically in your report, what the effect on marketability is and what the effect on value is. Some of the valuation considerations that Fannie Mae has, the appraiser must state if the subject's zoning allows accessory dwelling units. If the accessory dwelling unit does comply with zoning, the appraisal report must demonstrate that the improvements are typical for the market through the analysis of at least one comparable property with an accessory dwelling unit. Now, make sure when you're checking zoning that the accessory dwelling unit falls into the specific requirements that municipality has for that zoning. For example, some municipalities will say an accessory dwelling unit has to be less than 600 square feet. If your accessory dwelling unit is more than 600 square feet, then it may not comply with zoning. Now, if the accessory dwelling unit does not comply with zoning, the appraisal report must demonstrate the improvements are typical for the market through the analysis of at least 3 comparable sales that have the same non-compliant zoning use. That's a tough one sometimes because not every realtor, when they list their property, are going to put in the comments that, hey, I've got an illegal issue here with the accessory dwelling unit. So that takes a lot of digging on the part of the appraiser. So make sure that you're really aware of the difference between an accessory dwelling unit that complies with zoning and one that does not comply with zoning. Now, finding accessory dwelling units in the MLS, it's a little tricky sometimes. Realtors use different terminology than we do as appraisers. Realtor terms for accessory dwelling units commonly are in-law unit, granny unit, second home, secondary suite, secondary unit, apartment. These are the terms that you can use to search in the MLS and find that one hidden gem comparable that you need that has an accessory dwelling unit. Some other tips for finding them: expand your search parameters if you need to. If you do expand your search parameters in terms of location, if you're going out in distance, make sure you're addressing whether or not a comparable that's in another neighborhood has a location adjustment that's needed. Sometimes neighborhoods will sell for more or less for various factors, and you need to make sure that that's addressed. Search for keywords such as unit, second with a number 2, additional. Just remember that realtors don't use the same terminology that we do as appraisers. Search the multifamily class. Sometimes a A realtor will stick a single family home with a small additional unit in the multifamily class, and sometimes you can find them there. And one other trick that I use is you can display the marketing remarks in a line-by-line output that the realtors are inputting, and then use the keys Control F to find any keywords. And if the assignment is a purchase, ask the listing agent if they know of any. Sometimes when they do their CMAs, they knew of a property down the street that had a unit in the back that maybe wasn't disclosed in the listing. Some other considerations. For consistency of terminology and just to reduce confusion, we always suggest that you use the term accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, because this terminology is what's used by the forms and in our guidelines. When you start using other terms like in-law and granny unit, it's a little confusing because the reader may not know if that applies to an accessory dwelling unit or you're talking about something else. And always make sure that you check the zoning to address issues of legality. That's a big one. That's a very big one. Here's some resources. I did put the new HUD handbook that's coming out, and that's just because we're only about 3.5 months away from that. So that's probably a good place to start. The Fannie Mae Selling Guide, page 606. Read that. That talks about accessory dwelling units. And then there's a website that I found, Understanding and Appraising Properties with Accessory Dwelling Units. You can click on the link there. There was a really nice paper put together by some people from the Appraisal Institute about how to value accessory dwelling units. That can be a little tough sometimes also, but that'll give you some direction. And of course, if you ever have any questions, certainly make sure you reach out to Dennis or I, and we're happy to help. Thanks, and make it a great day.